This podcast is best listened to with headphones.
You don't want to go in there all by yourself, do you?
C.s.w presents Incarnation Red.
Episode 10. Talisman. To be perfectly honest, I don't even know where it came from. We must have moved into this house, 5-6 years ago, and it's been sitting on a side table that entire time, or so I assume. I mean, I can't quite remember when I first noticed its existence. There was no moment of sudden realization that it was sitting in my library, and it seems it could have been there forever. And yet, looking at it now, seated at my table across the room from it, it does strike me as unfamiliar. Well, I figure it must have been tucked away in some box or other when we moved here. Maybe my wife tucked it into a box last minute without the time to ask where it had come from. Or maybe it was something she had bought for the kids, though I can't imagine they would have much use for a paperweight. In any case, neither do I. I return to the book I'm reading, finish one more chapter before heading off to bed. I do still wonder where it's come from, though. The next morning, I drop my kids off at school, then return home to start working. I started working from home some 3 years ago now, all electronic and paperless. Thankfully, my home office is secluded from all other parts of the house, the bedroom, living room, the library. That way I can keep my work away from home, even though inside it. Besides, this house is certainly a large one, thanks to this job. It can stand to have one of its several rooms to not feel like home, when all of its other ones do. And anyway, when 5 p.m. rolls around, I wrap up and leave the home office and join the rest of the homey rooms to greet my kids, kiss my wife, and have some dinner. I always end up at home in the end. And as per my daily routine, once dinner is over, my wife and I have watched the news, the kids have gone to bed, and then my wife shortly after, I head upstairs to the library to do some reading. Tonight it's an older text about the expeditions of Roald Amundsen and Robert F. Scott, their race to the South Pole. How Amundsen's approach was ultimately the most proactive one. But as I'm reading, I'm still wondering about that paperweight, and I raise my eyes to the side table across the room. It sits there, just where it was, where it's always been, presumably. I stand up. I walk over to the side table, examine it. It's nothing too special, just a glass paperweight about the size of a baseball. Mostly spherical, but it looks like the bottom is flat so it can lay on the page without rolling. Its interior is of black, liquid patterns swirling and intertwining with the glass around them. And unlike the rest of the side table, there's no dust on its surface. It's clean, glassy, and shiny. I'm not sure what compels me to ask my wife about it. But that night, lying in bed, I do. Looking up at the ceiling in the dark as if I'm not even addressing her, I ask aloud, "Do you know where that paperweight in the library came from?" There's a shift in the bed next to me, then a brief groan, and she mutters something that I can't make out, then falls back to metronomic breaths, deep and slumbering. I stare at the ceiling for a while, as if the darkness would answer me. The next day, I take the kids to school as per usual. It's relentlessly hot outside, approaching the point where spring becomes summer, and even the house's air conditioning isn't enough. My wife and I open the windows to keep an airflow going, which helps, but can't completely mediate it. Not even, as we find out 7 hours later, after the sun goes down. We keep the windows open at dinner time, and just before my wife goes to bed and I go to the library, we close all the downstairs windows, and I promise her that I'll close the rest of them before I go to bed. But reading is difficult with the windows open. The draft keeps wandering in and lifting the pages repeatedly. I consider closing the window, but the sweat still on my forehead tells me not to. With something of a scoff, I realize that the exact thing I need right now is a paperweight. And I know I have one, so I leave my book open and face down to keep my place, and I stand up. I walk across the room, toward the side table, and when I get there, I reach down and pick up the paper. I drop the paperweight back onto the side table, then stumble to the floor. The sweat on my face has turned instantly cold, and vague cries of astonishment bleed from my throat. Sitting on the floor, I kick repeatedly, pushing myself away from the side table, sliding across the hardwood as my lips continue fumbling and folding with each breathless cry, and I feel myself getting lightheaded. But through it all, it's what's in my mind that I can't shake. The sights, the sounds, the sensations, the questions. What was that? What did I just experience? I saw, heard things that I can barely recall. It happened just moments ago, but whether it's the sheer intensity of it all overriding my brain or some self-defense mechanism my mind is using to prevent me from having to recall it all again, the memories have been fried from my brain. My heart is a battering ram aback my chest. The whole library is going in and out of focus. And I turn that wavering focus to the side table. The paperweight is sat right back where it was, where I dropped it, almost exactly back into its original position. As if I hadn't even touched it at all. I wipe the sweat off my face with my sleeve. I take a few deep breaths. Then I stand up, put up the book, and start closing the windows. The next day is a Saturday, and the kids are happy to be home. My wife and I are too, as we have a dinner party with the neighbors planned for tonight. It's something we do semi-regularly. The neighbors bring their kids and they play with our kids, while we parents sit in the dining room with a bottle or 2 or 4 of wine. Nice and relaxing. That's what I need tonight. Nice and relaxing. They show up around 6:30 or so, and the kids are already running off to the game room to their little exploits. My wife and I get dinner and drinks on the table, and before I know it, I'm feeling steady and soothed. The strangeness of last night all but washed completely away. Actually, I'm feeling very soothed, more and more as we finish eating and start focusing solely on drinking. And at some point, I bring into conversation an anecdote from a book that I've read. My wife rolls her eyes and laughs, saying how I always do this. How I'm always puttering around in my library, obsessing over this book or another. At the word library, one of our guests looks at me with surprise. He says he didn't realize I had a library in the house, and I'm much too tipsy to resist taking him upstairs to show him. The whole party follows, legitimately interested, or so I perceive them to be. We bring our drinks with us, and I begin showing the interested guest around the shelves, telling him how I've organized them, how old certain volumes are. He nods along while sipping his drink. At some point, someone asks me where coasters might be. I tell them I have some, and I reach for them on the side table.
I see pain unfolding to the surface of reality. Hideous broken things all scrambled around the wasteland of soul. I see the screaming pools of water, the cackling clouds going measuring back into the ground they sprung from. I see the black roses dancing and speaking to me with something like teeth, and I see the blood flowing back into the soil.
The first thing I feel is the hardwood floor slamming into the back of my head. Then it's what I hear, the wine glass shattering, the gasps and cries all around me, and I feel the wine dripping lukewarm over my abdomen. Then I open my eyes. The light is blinding, like a private sun just for me in this new solar system I have stumbled into. And I am on a collision course. It isn't until my wife's face peers down at me that I realize my glasses have fallen off. I grope around and find them, then clumsily jam them back onto my face. My wife tries to hold my hand from doing so, to guide them onto my face herself, but I don't need it. I'm just fine. There is nothing wrong with my perception. The only thing that's wrong is what I am perceiving. The dinner party more or less ends there. I can't really tell them anything except that I've had a shock, maybe some feint of dizziness or something. At some point I try and blame the alcohol, but it just doesn't ring true. It's clear to me and everyone that within an instant, I've become more sober than I knew was possible. After they leave, I put myself to bed immediately, and my wife handles the kids before coming into the bedroom. She sits on the bed, and I ask her what happened. She says I had reached for the coasters on the side table, my hand wavering a little bit, and instead it found the paperweight sitting next to the coasters. And then, as if by an electric shock, I went still, locked in place, shaking just slightly but shaking all over. My throat made choked noises. My eyes had glazed over. But my hand would not leave the paperweight, glued to its surface the entire time, going from a slight touch to a full-on grasp of the entire thing, until after 5-10 seconds that felt like 5-10 minutes, my hold released, and I fell backwards. She asked me what it was that had happened, really. But before my tongue could even begin to stir, I'm asleep. The next morning, I wake up to a note left for me on the nightstand. It tells me that my wife and the kids are gone at church, but she wanted to let me rest after last night. So the house is empty. It's just me. Pale daylight comes in through the windows. I lift myself off the bed, stand up with sore limbs. I put on clothes, then go out into the kitchen for some breakfast, but I'm not hungry. I sit down on the couch with a glass of water, and I don't drink any of it. I turn on the TV, and I don't watch it, or listen, or really register that it's there at all. My mind is on other things. I stare at the television remote, and I know that pushing certain buttons on it will produce a certain effect. I could hit volume up, and the volume would increase. The menu button will take me to the menu. The power button will turn the TV off and disable any other buttons from having effect. It's an object with predictable functionality. Like all objects, really. All except one. I guess I just wish I knew, you know? If I just knew why it happened, I could get past it. Because there is no reason, really, why this should be happening. Right? There's no such object in existence that can do things like this. So how? How is it like this? How can it bring me to the floor in a state of shock just from the mere touch of it? And what are these things that I see, that I experience when touching it? And better yet, why can I never quite recall them after having directly witnessed and experienced them in the most abrasive way I can imagine? I sip my glass of water, and it tastes of air. I run my hands over my face and think. I feel my skin, run my fingers over my arms and shoulders and chest. I psychosomatically evaluate each of my muscles. I have not been wounded. I have not been hurt by this. So touching it poses no real threat to me. It can't hurt me. In fact, the only thing hurting me at the moment is just how little I understand, how little concept I have of what even occurred last night, or the night before that, or how a paperweight I can't recall having seen ended up in my home, or how anybody placed it on that side table without experiencing it. How has anybody ever touched it without it touching them? Aren't those things I should be trying to find out? I stand up and head toward the staircase. There's got to be more. There just has to be. There is something inside that paperweight. Some secret has been hidden within it. And I just have to figure it out. I have to know what it is. And if I just hold on to it for long enough, I will know. It can't hurt me. I just have to touch it. It's lying on the floor of the library, where I dropped it last night. It's on its side, flat side facing the wall, but its patterns still look the same. The same liquid chaos, murky strokes of darkness. And from this close, its patterns look almost like glory. Like the truth. Like
it seeps into burning things and sustains them. Smoke goes down into chunks of hollow dust, whispered to one another in the fresh, warm faces, holds its enormous body. The air is glass and it cries while fragments of space try to recreate. Like flowers grow maggots and bones flush again. The river runs back into black ships swimming forward against the inverted current, while the trees laugh in silence between relief and madness. It is sinking and I can't keep hold of it. I sleep within black clay and I can feel it thinking as it swallows me. The moon is underneath the earth and it watches me bleed. This world is opening up.
they're looking down at me. My wife is looking down at me. My kids are beside her, back from church. Help me. Help me. I don't know what to tell the doctors. Neither of us do. They examined me on the basis of a seizure, but there's no sign of that. So they can't diagnose me. So they can't treat me. So they let me go home that night. And I don't know what to tell my wife either. Don't know how to describe the influence of that thing. Don't know how to justify why I touched it again in the first place. And before all that, I don't even know how to make her believe that it is, in fact, the paperweight, and not me. Or maybe it's both. Maybe it's the paperweight and me, all in one. Maybe. I don't do much reading at night anymore. Just drinking and telling my wife that it's reading. Sitting at the desk in my library, holding a bottle in my hand, scanning the shelves of books across the room and thinking about none of those things at all. It's been weeks now since I last touched it, and every waking moment of that time has been spent lost in a sea of questions. The same ones over and over. Why does that paperweight do what it does? What secret of this reality is contained within it? And why can I never fully recall the things I witness, mere seconds after witnessing them? It's as if it's on purpose. Like it's keeping those memories away from me. Withholding them, keeping my mind from fully grasping whatever there is to grasp in that thing, in its swirling patterns, its cold weight, the stark shades of black intermingling with each other in a wild, contained explosion, like some bewitched energy of the universe, captured and preserved inside this ball, kept pure for the sake of my experiencing it. My experience. But what good is my experience of it if I can't understand it? If I don't understand it, then why would I even... Of course. I see it now. The problem is not that touching it yields no understanding. The problem is that I touch it without understanding. There's the riddle. The pain, the confusion that comes from touching it doesn't come from the sphere. It comes from me. From my lack of understanding. Unable to translate the secrets of the sphere into anything but pain and confusion. The puzzle isn't inside the paperweight. It's inside of me. And sitting here, staring at it from across the room, watching as it beholds me from the floor with that same black stare. I think I've found the key. So I stand up, and I walk toward it. When I touch it, it touches me. And that makes us equal. That makes us one and the same. After all, what is even the difference between myself and an object? There is none. Not anymore. Now, in its presence, at its touch, I hold up no pretense of humanity, no illusions of self-defined superiority. No, in fact, I am much less than this glass sphere that I am approaching. Though we exist on the same plane of matter, it is the one who holds the light, and I am the one to humbly ask it. Even if it meant my death, I would touch it nonetheless, because that would be what it's supposed to mean. I know that now. I know what the paperweight is. It has taught me in its patience, its mute wisdom. But more than that, it taught me just who, just what I am. And with that knowledge, with that puzzle solved inside of me, I reach down. And I touch it. And here I am. Here I am at last. Freed from my body, freed from the delusion of self, released into the freedom of this sphere, within the swirling black patterns, the intertwining liquid glass, free. Free. And I see my wife searching, looking for me. Or rather, for my body. She searches everywhere for it. But all she can find is the paperweight. I'm glad she does. And I hope she hears me. Hears my call. My invitation. To come touch it. Touch it.